Now we're getting towards the end of the season. I still have some hunt left in me. I'm hunting with a bow tag in Wisconsin. We have some weird CWD hunts out here in Minnesota. I think they're totally useless for CWD, but they give you an opportunity to hunt if you want to go out. We don't have any monsters, so I'm not even sure we're going out, that I know of anyways. We're scouring the trail cameras today. A little bit of hunt left. This is a great time to review the hunting season and to really give yourself a checkup and be very critical of how you did. Don't just take it for granted that the deer left at this time, and that's what they always do. They like somewhere else better. Always ask yourself why. That's what leads to knowledge. That's what leads to learning and actually learning from your experiences. And I think that's critical. You can't just take it for face value. The deer come and go at this time of the season. You really want to know why. For me, that checkup could mean that you're hunting for a weekend, the first big weekend in October. You had tons of trail cam pictures. You hunt for a weekend, the trail camera pictures go dark. Don't just look at it like, oh, my neighbor's poaching deer. They're poaching deer around here. I hear all that all the time. Poaching's everywhere, and I don't think it's everywhere to the degree that people think it is. There's more reasons why bucks disappear. Be very critical of yourself, how you hunt the land, your access. Be critical of even stand locations. This one's becoming a dud. Well, why? It could be that your hunting pressure is too high. It could be that there's ag land that's changing, beans, corn, and that stand's always going to be bad during a bean year versus a corn year, something like that. Be very critical. To me, the number one checkup by far that you can use for really grading your hunting and your habitat work, your attraction, hunting's always the lowest hole in the bucket, is your doe herd and how dependable they are. Does and the doe herd stability is your number one checkup. If does are hard to hunt, you're doing a poor job. If you don't have does and fawns in your land after November, you're doing a bad job on the habitat, maybe even the hunting too. Does are very stable. I've heard the story, we have this 8-year-old doe, we've been trying to kill her for 5 years. Well, if that's the case, something's really messed up on your land where you hunt. Way too much hunting pressure, probably not an assemblage of good quality habitat where they're going from point A to point B all the time. The older a doe becomes, the more dependable she is in her movements and where she beds during the day, and she's a lot easier to kill. Doesn't matter if it's a bow or a gun. Typically, when we go out here, if I'm hunting public land in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, if I'm hunting private land in Wisconsin and Minnesota, could just about kill a doe every day of the season. Then I want to go hunting. You know, I'm not going to go when it's 80 degrees and 40-mile-an-hour winds during the end of October, but even then you could probably find a doe to kill. They're very dependable. Does have very small home ranges, number one. Those home ranges are very tight. They are not as large as mature bucks. If a mature buck is said to have a home range of 3 square miles, I believe in most cases 95% of that's at night. That's beside the point. But does just have a fraction of that movement. I saw it, and this is where you can use numbers to lie, studies to lie. There's a wildlife biologist up in the UP in Michigan that pointed out, per John Ozoga's studies, that does had a 10-mile home range or 7-mile, whatever it was. Well, John Ozoga was sitting in the crowd and was able to correct the district wildlife biologist and point out that that included actual winter migration routes. And so when you looked at does as a whole, they live in a very tight window. And so that's when you have an actual person that lived deer research like John Ozoga. He knows those numbers and studies inside and out, and he doesn't use them to manipulate or to throw something out there that's not true. Does have a very small home range. What's really cool about that small range that does have is if they have adequate food, they have adequate cover, and it's not hunter pressured for the entire hunting season, they generally stick around and stay. Does are homebodies too. So not only do they have that small home range and that tight window, they don't move very far or stray from it. Bucks are all over the place, not as reliable. That's why we talk about hunting bucks so much, because if you have a stable habitat and hunting plan, a quality plan, then you're going to have those does and fawns. They're the easy part. So very reliable hunting patterns. When you have does that have small home ranges, that creates lots of reliable hunting patterns right here. Does are easy. Small home ranges, dependable movements, very easy to capitalize on. This doe and these two fawns come into this corner of the food source every single afternoon, an hour before dark. It rarely ever changes, to the point if it does, you wonder if someone actually spooked them. If someone was trespassing, what's going on? We had a property like that in Wisconsin where we had a doe family group of 5 to 7 does and fawns that would come out in this certain area all the time. And all of a sudden for a week they weren't. The trail cameras, we went in there and hunted, they were gone. Well, we found a juice bottle under one of our stands and a candy wrap or something, so someone had actually been trespassing and pushed those deer out, probably hunting with the wrong winds. They weren't back for a week or two, so they're that reliable that you can tell what they're doing. That makes them easy. Does are easy. If you provide quality deer habitat, just adequate for them, doesn't even have to be the best. Mature bucks, on the other hand, they go for the best food. They'll go in November to a standing cornfield a mile away, and they might stay there as long as they have good habitat, good cover, and they're not hunter pressure. Does, on the other hand, if they had frosted out alfalfa they've been feeding on all summer long, it gets frosted out, but there's still an appreciation of alfalfa out there, even though it's brown and stubble. If they can still eat it and it's appreciable, they'll probably stay if their cover's still adequate for them for November, December, January, and they haven't been hunting pressured. Pretty easy. You just put quality habitat out. And what's interesting about doe is they can take a little bit more hunting pressure. They can take a little bit more social pressure. They tend to herd up. They tend to think as in herd mentality, where bucks are individual thinkers. Same level of intelligence, but when a buck grows up to be 5, 6 years old and he's been used to living with a few in a brat pack, and then all of a sudden when he's 3 or 4, most of his buddies are dead, and when he's 5 or 6, he's by himself. He's been used to making decisions with just himself or a couple others for a very long time. And that's what separates bucks from does, especially in how they react to hunting pressure. They're a lot more reactive than does are. Then they're a lot less tolerant of stress too. Does, on the other hand, again, easy. You put great habitat out and you put great food plots, great cover, does will stick around, especially if you don't go out of your way to spook them. And even then, the does will take a little bit. And that's where you see these big doe herd properties where they're not hunting them well, but they have great habitat. And there's a lot of people that fall into that category. They wonder where the mature bucks go. They're not in the neighborhood. Well, they're probably sitting 3 or 4 properties away. Most of the mature bucks are on one parcel because less than 5% of all parcels hold the daylight attraction of those mature bucks. And if you have an overstressed, large doe herd on your property in that consistent doe factory all the way from summer to fall, those bucks are probably going to live somewhere else. Does can tolerate a lot of pressure and stress, whether it's from hunters or from each other. So it's easy to build a doe herd. Number 4, season-long goal. You want to have and maintain the attraction of those does and fawns for the largest window of the entire hunting season that you can, and there's no reason that you shouldn't. If you have private land and you have good quality food sources that last, they're meant to last for September, October, November, December. If you have good high stem count cover, we have 2.3 miles of switchgrass edge to put in on this property next year. Not a lot of acres, but a lot of switchgrass in linear locations all around the property and the edge so that we can get in and out of the property without spooking deer behind that switchgrass. But we want to hold those deer on quality cover. We're improving the cover during the wintertime here on the property. But really, when it comes down to it, if you're making good habitat improvements that relate to each other and they're the right improvements, then you should have does and fawns that have dependable movements that you could capitalize on and shoot at any time, just about all season long. The greater the window, the greater it lets you know that you're doing a great job with those dependable doe movements. Again, if your does are all over the place and you have a hard time shooting them or targeting them, then look to poor food, look to poor cover options, but especially look to a heavy dose of applied hunting pressure as it relates to does and fawns. And really, if your does are hard to hunt, there's something bad going on. And finally, number 5, it's hard to see down here. Number 1 sign of hunting health is the stability of your doe population. So hunting health, herd health, habitat management, if you're into all of it, watch your does. They're going to tell you a lot. And I'll tell you what, we have a lot of wind right here, and so we're having to play around with this board right here. But you know, you can tell how you did. It's a good question to ask right now. But if you don't have all these 5 things going on, dependable doe movements, attraction all season long, reliable hunting opportunities, you see that small range of does that they're just in pockets on your property because you're habitat's consistent and it's consistently unpressured, and you don't have one food plot planted in this over here, one over there, and you're starting to fragment the use of the does during the entire season. You want consistent use all season long. That's your base of all deer hunting and habitat management. If you don't have the consistent doe movement and use of your land on your property, then don't even think about buck management. You have to have this step in place before you can actually worry about bucks, holding bucks on your land. And I'm not saying you want a doe factory with a lot of does. You just have to have consistent doe use, adequate use. That's okay to have more of a doe factory in November and December when you're actually collecting deer all season long and you're holding them on your land because of the great job you've done with managing your hunting pressure, your food, and your cover. But you want a balance going into the season. And when you have that balance, it's structured. Does are living here, they're traveling from point A to point B, point C to point D, point E to point F. You have those stable movements on your land. They're easy to capitalize on. When you want to reduce hunting pressure or doe population, overall population, you can easily do so. If you want to grow the population, you just let it ride and let the population grow. There's no one size fits all for how many does you should shoot on a property. But bottom line is, once you have that stability of doe movement, which we tried to do in Minnesota here, we set up food sources adjacent to bedding areas where we thought does would live, and then we've addressed buck locations where we thought we could kill bucks off to the side and put stands in to do so, and it paid off big time for us. But it all starts with a stability, a doe movement on your land, and it's not only a great management practice for your hunting and habitat, but it's also a great checkup when you get to the end of the year to look back and say, hey, how stable were the doe movements? Could I capitalize on them? Were they easy to hunt? And if you can answer yes to those questions and these points that we've discussed, then you're doing a great job. It's your number one way to check up your land towards the end of the season, how you did with your doe population, how that doe population is doing. And the beauty is that most of the time, those are just some quick adjustments that you can make for the following season if you're finding some problems this year, to make sure that the stability of your doe family group population is where it needs to be, whether it was this season or next season, and any kind of checkup for seasons to come, for decades to come, as you enjoy your property and try to build a great, high-quality deer herd.
As we transition into habitat season, I hope you've had a chance to check out my web class, How to Design Your Whitetail Parcel. It's on my website, whitetailhabitatsolutions.com. I have a link in the description, and I hope you can find it, check it out, and enjoy it this year.